The massive chamber fell silent as Ambassador Veltar stepped forward. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he held the formal declaration. Around him, representatives from 47 different species watched with hungry eyes. The Galactic Confederation had finally reached this moment. The human species, Veltar announced, his voice carrying across the vast hall, has been contained for 300 years. We thought this was enough. We were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Crusade delegation clicked their mandibles in approval. The floating ethereals pulsed with soft purple light. Even the usually calm Centaurans shifted in their seats. Earth and its surrounding system have been a cancer in our galaxy, Veltar continued. A disease that we foolishly thought we could simply ignore. But diseases spread. They grow stronger. They wait for the right moment to strike. This was not entirely true, and many in the chamber knew it. Humanity had not tried to expand beyond their solar system in 3 centuries. They had not sent even a single probe past the automated defense platforms that surrounded their space. But truth mattered little now. The Confederation needed a war. Resource conflicts had torn apart 3 major trade routes. The Outer Rim territories were in open rebellion. Pirates raided cargo ships with increasing boldness. The member species were starting to eye each other with suspicion instead of cooperation. Wars between member worlds had broken out twice in the last decade alone. They needed someone to blame, someone to fear, someone to unite against. The time has come, Veltar raised his voice, to end the human threat once and for all. The Galactic Confederation hereby declares total war against the human species. Their quarantine ends today, not because we grant them freedom, but because we grant them extinction. The chamber erupted in cheers. Delegates from dozens of worlds jumped to their feet, shouting approval in languages that spanned the galaxy. This was what they had been waiting for. A chance to prove their strength against an enemy that could not fight back. The humans had been trapped behind their blockade for so long that most species had forgotten what they were actually capable of. The old generation that remembered the human expansion was mostly dead. The new generation only knew stories of a primitive species that had gotten lucky a few times before being properly contained. The human military, Veltar waited for the noise to die down, consists of perhaps a few hundred outdated ships. Their technology has remained static for 3 centuries. They have no allies, no resources beyond their single solar system, no hope of victory. This will not be a war. This will be a cleanup operation. More cheers filled the hall. The Zephyrian war fleets would lead the assault, supported by Crusade battle swarms and Centauran dreadnoughts. 12,000 ships in total. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Surely enough to handle whatever pathetic resistance the humans might offer. Fleet Admiral Kextar stepped forward to address the assembly. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke. Our forces will sweep through the human system like a tide. We will start with their outer planets, then move inward to Earth itself. Total victory is estimated within 72 standard hours. The timeline was ambitious but realistic. Human space was tiny compared to the vast territories controlled by Confederation species. Earth had only 8 planets and a few dozen moons. How long could it possibly take to conquer such a small area? The human homeworld will become a monument to Confederation strength, Kextar continued. Future generations will visit Earth to see what happens to species that threaten galactic peace. The lesson will never be forgotten. As the assembly dissolved into celebration and planning, the formal declaration was broadcast across the galaxy. Every world, every ship, every settlement received the same message. Humanity had been marked for extinction. The 300-year quarantine was ending, but not in the way anyone expected. The message traveled through hyperspace relays at faster-than-light speed. Within hours, it reached the edge of human space, passing through the automated defense platforms that had kept humanity trapped for so long. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath what had once been Geneva, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen received the transmission. Her weathered face showed no surprise as she read the formal declaration. Around the conference table, the other members of the Terran Defense Council waited for her reaction. "Well," Admiral Chen said finally, setting down the datapad, "it looks like our vacation is over." Dr. Amara Okafor, the chief xenobiologist, laughed softly. 300 years is a pretty long vacation. I was starting to get bored." General Marcus Morrison cracked his knuckles and grinned. "Think they remember what happened the last time they tried to mess with us?" "Apparently not," Admiral Chen replied. She stood and walked to the massive display screen that dominated one wall of the command center. With a few gestures, she brought up a tactical map of the solar system. "Computer, show current fleet positions." The display lit up with thousands of contact icons. Ships of every size and configuration dotted the space around every planet, every moon, every asteroid of significant size. The numbers were staggering. "Confederation intelligence estimates we have a few hundred ships," Dr. Okafor observed. "That's optimistic of them." "Should we tell them they missed a decimal point or two?" General Morrison asked. "Let's not spoil the surprise," Admiral Chen replied. She turned back to her colleagues, her expression growing serious. "Initiate Protocol 7. Send word to all sectors. The garden blooms at dawn." Within minutes, quantum communications networks hummed to life. Throughout the solar system, messages flashed between hidden installations on Mars, secret bases in the asteroid belt, and camouflaged stations orbiting the gas giants. The signals reached even further, to places the Confederation had never suspected existed. On Mars, massive, hangar doors began to open in the side of Olympus Mons. The mountain itself was hollow, converted into the largest shipyard in the solar system. Thousands of vessels that had never seen space began their final preparations for launch. In the asteroid belt, what looked like ordinary chunks of rock suddenly came alive with activity. Mining platforms revealed themselves to be mobile battle stations. Processing facilities opened to disgorge fleets of escort ships. The belt itself was not just a source of raw materials, but a fortress that spanned millions of kilometers. Around Jupiter, the gas giant's moons bustled with movement. Europa's ice-covered surface cracked open to reveal launch tubes that extended deep into the ocean below. Ganymede's research stations were actually command centers coordinating defensive networks. Even tiny Io contributed, its volcanic activity masking the heat signatures of weapon testing facilities. But the real surprise lay in the outer solar system. Between Neptune and Pluto, in the cold darkness of deep space, thousands of objects that had registered as asteroids or comets began to move. They had been there for decades, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this moment. These were the garden ships, massive vessels built not for war, but for life. Each one contained entire ecosystems, complete with forests, lakes, and cities. Millions of humans lived and worked in these mobile worlds, connected by quantum communication networks that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. Admiral Chen smiled as the reports came in. 300 years of preparation were about to pay off. The Confederation had made two critical mistakes. First, they had assumed that humanity would remain static during their imprisonment. Second, they had forgotten the most important lesson about humans. They were at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. "Status report," Admiral Chen requested. "All sectors report ready," Dr. Okafor replied, scanning her displays. "Garden Fleet Alpha through Zeta are in position. Mars shipyards report full deployment capability. Asteroid defense grid is online. Jupiter Command confirms all systems operational." "What about the outer system?" General Morrison asked. "The Shepherds are moving into position as we speak," Admiral Chen replied. "Pluto base reports successful completion of Phase 1 modifications. The Oort Cloud stations are ready to begin Phase 2 on your command. The Oort Cloud stations were humanity's deepest secret. For 2 centuries, automated probes had been building installations in the distant shell of ice and rock that surrounded the solar system. These stations had been watching, learning, and preparing for exactly this moment. "Time until the Confederation fleet arrives?" Admiral Chen asked. "Approximately 72 hours at their current speed," Dr. Okafor replied. "They're not trying to hide their approach. Why would they? They think we're helpless." "Perfect," Admiral Chen said. "That gives us time to make the final preparations. Send word to all stations. Operation Homecoming is now active." Operation Homecoming was the culmination of 3 centuries of planning. It was not just a military operation, but a statement. A declaration that humanity had not spent their exile crying in a corner, but growing stronger than anyone could imagine. The Confederation fleet was approaching with 12,000 ships, expecting to find a few hundred human vessels defending a handful of planets. Instead, they would find something that defied their understanding of what was possible. They would find that the cage they thought they had built around humanity was actually a cocoon, and now it was time for the butterfly to emerge. "Admiral." Chen walked to the window of the command center, looking up at the Earth's surface far above. Somewhere up there, children were playing in parks, completely unaware that their species had just been marked for extinction. They would continue playing because humanity had learned something important during their long isolation. They had learned patience. They had learned to plan. Most importantly, they had learned that the greatest weapon was not the one that destroyed your enemies, but the one that made them realize they had never been your enemies at all. "Admiral," Dr. Okafor called out, "incoming transmission from the Confederation fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender." Admiral Chen turned back to her colleagues, her smile widening. "Tell them we'll consider it, right after they explain why they think 12,000 ships will be enough." The Defense Council erupted in laughter. 300 years of preparation had led to this moment. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, expecting to find victims. They were about to find gardeners instead. The transport ship glided silently through the asteroid belt, its hull barely larger than a personal shuttle. Ambassador Veltar pressed his face against the viewport, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was supposed to be his victory tour, a chance to inspect the pathetic human defenses before the main fleet arrived. Instead, he was looking at something impossible. "Captain," Veltar called to the ship's commander, "are you certain we're in the right location?" Captain Thex checked his navigation displays for the 3rd time. "Yes, Ambassador. We're in the heart of the human asteroid belt, exactly where intelligence said their mining operations would be." But this was not mining. What sprawled before them was a city. No, not just a city. An entire civilization built into and around the asteroids themselves. Structures that gleamed like crystal-connected floating chunks of rock and metal. Ships moved between them in organized streams, following traffic patterns that spoke of centuries of development. "How many people could live in something like this?" Veltar asked quietly. "Sir, our scanners are detecting massive population centers throughout the belt," the sensor operator reported. "Conservative estimates suggest millions of inhabitants." Veltar felt his blood run cold. According to Confederation records, the entire human population was barely 8 billion, mostly concentrated on Earth with small colonies on Mars and a few moons. The asteroid belt was supposed to be uninhabited except for automated mining platforms. "Take us deeper," Veltar ordered. "I need to see more." As they moved through the belt, the scope of human construction became even more apparent. What had looked like natural asteroids from a distance revealed themselves to be carefully shaped and connected. Gardens grew inside transparent domes. Children played in zero-gravity playgrounds that spiraled around spinning habitats. Elderly humans tended to floating farms that produced more food per cubic meter than most planetary agriculture. "This is not possible," Veltar whispered. "Where did they get the resources? The technology? We've been watching them for 300 years. On Earth, Admiral Chen was asking herself different questions. She stood in the observation deck of Haven Station, one of the largest structures in the Garden Fleet. Through the transparent aluminum walls, she could see stars that had been her home's only companions for decades. "Status report on our guest?" she asked. Commander Torres, a woman whose family had lived in the belt for 5 generations, smiled grimly. "Ambassador Veltar's ship is currently passing through Sector 7. He seems surprised by what he's finding." "I imagine he would be," Admiral Chen replied. "The Confederation spent so much time congratulating themselves on trapping us that they never bothered to check what we were actually doing. Haven Station was a marvel of human engineering and determination. Built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, nearly 50 kilometers long, it contained everything a human city needed: residential areas, manufacturing centers, schools, hospitals, and research facilities. The station spun slowly, creating artificial gravity for those who wanted it while leaving the central core in zero gravity for specialized work. But Haven was just one of thousands of similar installations scattered throughout the solar system. Each one represented decades of careful construction, hidden from Confederation sensors by technology that made them effectively invisible. "How did we manage to hide all of this?" Commander Torres asked. Admiral Chen gestured toward the stars. "The galaxy is vast, and most species think in terms of planets. They look for heat signatures, radio transmissions, the kinds of things that planets produce. They never thought to look for a civilization that deliberately scattered itself across empty space. The truth was both simpler and more complex than that. Humanity had learned hard lessons during their expansion phase, before the Confederation had forced them back to Earth. They had learned that centralized populations were vulnerable, that planets could be blockaded, that star systems could be isolated. So they had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had become nomadic on an interstellar scale. The Garden ships were the crown jewel of this transformation. Each one was a world unto itself, complete with its own ecosystem and population. They moved constantly through the outer solar system, following complex orbital patterns that kept them hidden in the vast emptiness between planets. Dr. Okafor materialized beside Admiral Chen through a personal teleporter, a technology that would have shocked the Confederation scientists. "The ambassador's ship is requesting permission to dock at Haven Station." "Permission granted," Admiral Chen replied. "It's time he learned what humanity has really been doing with our imprisonment." An hour later, Ambassador Veltar found himself walking through corridors that defied everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. The walls seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, but they were clearly technological. Children ran past him speaking languages he had never heard, their laughter echoing through spaces that felt more like natural caverns than spaceship corridors. "Welcome to Haven Station," Admiral Chen said, greeting him in the central plaza. Around them, humans went about their daily lives as if receiving alien ambassadors was perfectly normal. "I trust your tour of the belt was educational." "This is impossible," Veltar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our intelligence reports said you had limited manufacturing capability, basic technology. How did you build all of this?" "Admiral." Chen smiled and began walking. Veltar had no choice but to follow. "You made a mistake, Ambassador. You assumed that being cut off from galactic trade would make us weaker. Instead, it forced us to become completely self-sufficient." They passed through a manufacturing center where humans worked alongside machines that seemed to think for themselves. Raw materials went in one end, and finished products emerged from the other with no visible intermediate steps. The efficiency was staggering. "We had to invent everything from scratch," Admiral Chen continued. "New alloys that were stronger than anything in your databases. Energy sources that could power entire cities without producing detectable signatures. Most importantly, we learned to work with biology instead of against it. She gestured to the walls around them. These ships aren't just built, they're grown. The hull material is a hybrid of metal and engineered organic compounds. It can repair itself, adapt to different conditions, even evolve if necessary. Veltar touched one of the walls and jerked his hand back in shock. It was warm, and he could swear he felt a pulse. Living ships? Living everything, Dr. Okafor said, joining the conversation. We learned that the most sustainable technology is the kind that can reproduce and maintain itself. Every garden ship is essentially a single organism, with humans living symbiotically inside it. They entered a vast chamber that took Veltar's breath away. It was a forest, complete with towering trees, flowing streams, and wildlife. But they were clearly in the middle of a spaceship, surrounded by stars visible through transparent sections of the hull. How many people live here? Veltar asked. Haven Station houses about 2 million permanent residents, Admiral Chen replied. But we have over 6,000 garden ships of various sizes. The total population of our space-based civilization is approximately 4 billion people. The numbers hit Veltar like a physical blow. 4 billion people living in space, hidden from all galactic detection systems. It meant that Earth's surface population was only half of humanity's total numbers. It meant that the Confederation had been planning to attack a target twice as large as they had imagined. Why are you showing me this? Veltar asked. Admiral Chen stopped walking and turned to face him. Because your people are about to make a terrible mistake. You think you're coming to exterminate a small, weak species trapped on a single planet. Instead, you're about to attack a civilization that has spent 3 centuries preparing for exactly this moment. She gestured toward a viewing platform that overlooked the forest. As they climbed to the top, Veltar could see through the transparent hull to the space beyond. What he saw there made his legs go weak. Ships. Thousands of them. Not the crude, bulky vessels he expected from human technology, but sleek, organic-looking craft that moved through space like living creatures. Some were clearly warships, bristling, with weapons that pulsed with contained energy. Others were obviously support vessels, their hulls opening to reveal manufacturing bays and repair facilities. This is just one battle group, Admiral Chen said calmly. We have dozens of them scattered throughout the solar system, plus the fixed defenses, the mobile platforms, and the installations you haven't seen yet. How many ships do you have? Veltar asked, dreading the answer. Counting everything from fighters to dreadnoughts? About 50,000 active vessels, with production facilities that can double that number in a matter of weeks. 50,000 ships. The Confederation fleet approaching Earth consisted of 12,000 vessels, and that had been considered overwhelming force. Humanity had built a fleet more than 4 times that size, while supposedly trapped and helpless. This changes everything, Veltar whispered. Does it? Admiral Chen asked. Your people declared war on us. Your fleet is already on its way. The only question now is whether this ends with understanding or with the complete destruction of everything you've built. They walked in silence for several minutes, passing through sections of the station that showcased humanity's incredible advances. Medical facilities where diseases were cured by reprogramming the patient's own cells. Educational centers where children learned by directly interfacing with quantum computers. Research labs where scientists manipulated matter at the subatomic level. We didn't want this war, Admiral Chen said finally. For 300 years, we've been content to develop our civilization in peace. We could have broken through your blockade at any time in the last century. We chose not to. Why? Veltar asked. Because we learned something important during our isolation, Admiral Chen replied. We learned that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to know when not to use that strength. They returned to the central plaza where a crowd had gathered. Humans of all ages filled the space, But they were not alone. Veltar was shocked to see other species among them. Centaurans, ethereals, even a few Craxi, all living peacefully, alongside humans, integrated into their society. Refugees, Admiral Chen explained, noticing his surprise. Species that were displaced by Confederation territorial disputes. Pirates who chose rehabilitation over punishment. Scientists and artists who wanted to work without political interference. We've been taking them in for decades. The Confederation doesn't know about this, Veltar realized. The Confederation doesn't know about a lot of things, Admiral Chen replied. You've been so focused on containing us that you never bothered to ask what we were becoming. As Veltar prepared to leave Haven Station, his mind reeling from everything he had seen, Admiral Chen gave him a final message to take back to his fleet. Tell your commanders that humanity offers them one chance, she said. Turn around and go home. Forget this war. Forget your dreams of conquest. Choose to live in peace with neighbors who want nothing more than to be left alone. And if they refuse? Veltar asked. Admiral Chen's smile faded, replaced by an expression of infinite sadness. Then they will learn why we spent 300 years preparing for this day. And I promise you, Ambassador, the lesson will be one the galaxy never forgets. As Veltar's shuttle departed Haven Station, Admiral Chen watched it disappear into the asteroid field. Around her, the garden ships continued their ancient dance through space, carrying the dreams and hopes of a species that had refused to let imprisonment become extinction. The Confederation had tried to cage humanity. Instead, they had given them the greatest gift possible: time to evolve beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Soon they would all understand what that evolution had wrought. Fleet Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Galactic Dominion, watching the tactical displays with growing confidence. 12,000 ships from across the Confederation followed in perfect formation behind him. The largest military force in galactic history, assembled for what should be the easiest victory in recent memory. Status report, Kextar commanded. All fleets report ready for combat, his tactical officer replied. Zephyrian battle groups are in position. Craxi swarms are prepared for rapid assault. Centauran dreadnoughts are charging their main weapons. We should reach the edge of human space within the hour. Kexatar nodded with satisfaction. 300 years of human isolation was about to end. The pest that had once threatened galactic peace would finally be exterminated. Any sign of human defensive activity? He asked. None, sir, the sensor operator reported. Their system appears to be completely undefended. We're detecting minimal energy signatures from their planets. Their entire fleet seems to consist of perhaps 50 vessels, all concentrated around Earth. 50 ships? Kextar laughed. Against 12,000. This will be over in minutes. But as the Confederation fleet crossed into human space, something felt wrong. The automated defense platforms that had maintained the blockade for centuries hung silent and dark. There were no patrol ships, no early warning beacons, no sign that humanity even knew they were coming. Where are the defensive installations? Kextar asked. Intelligence reports indicated significant fortifications throughout the system. Sir, the sensor operator said, uncertainty creeping into his voice, I'm not detecting any artificial structures beyond the planets and their natural satellites. It's as if the entire system is empty. Kextar frowned. Empty space was wrong. Every civilized system in the galaxy bustled with activity. Space stations, cargo ships, communication, relays, mining operations. The human system looked like it had been abandoned. Take us deeper into the system, Kextar ordered. All fleets maintain formation. Stay alert for human tricks. But as hours passed, no tricks materialized. The Confederation fleet moved through, the outer solar system unopposed. Jupiter hung in space like a giant marble, its moons showing no signs of military activity. Saturn's rings sparkled peacefully in the sunlight. Mars appeared to be nothing more than a red rock with a few small settlements. "This is too easy," Admiral Zexara of the Craxi forces transmitted from her command ship. "Humans are devious. They must be planning something." "Perhaps," Kextar replied. "But planning what? We have them completely outgunned and outnumbered. Even if they had hidden every ship in their pathetic fleet, they couldn't pose a serious threat to our forces." As the fleet approached Earth's orbital space, the full scope of human weakness became apparent. The blue-green planet hung defenseless in the void, its surface cities glowing softly in the darkness. A few small ships orbited lazily around it, clearly civilian vessels. "Pathetic," Kextar muttered. 300 years to prepare for this moment, and this is all they can manage? "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." "Put it through," Kextar ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what looked like a simple command center. A human female in a plain uniform stood at attention, her expression calm despite the overwhelming force bearing down on her world. "This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the woman said. "To the approaching Confederation. Fleet, welcome to the Sol system. We've been expecting you." Kextar stepped forward, his four arms gesturing dramatically. "Human Admiral, I am Fleet Admiral Kextar of the Galactic Confederation. You are vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick." Admiral Chen smiled, and something about that smile made Kextar uncomfortable. "I appreciate the offer, Admiral, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline. You see, we've been preparing for this conversation for quite some time." "Preparing?" Kextar laughed. "With 50 ships against 12,000, what possible preparation could matter in the face of such overwhelming superiority?" "Let me show you," Admiral Chen replied. The transmission ended, and for a moment, nothing happened. The Confederation fleet continued its advance toward Earth, weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto the few visible human vessels. Then, space came alive. What had appeared to be empty vacuum suddenly revealed itself to be humanity's true strength. Ships materialized from nowhere, first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They decloaked from behind every asteroid, emerged from hidden bases on every moon, rose from the depths of space in formations that stretched across astronomical distances. But these were not the crude, bulky vessels that Confederation intelligence had expected. These ships moved like living things, their hulls flowing and adapting as they maneuvered. Some crackled with energy fields that bent space around them. Others appeared almost biological, their surfaces rippling with what looked like engineered flesh. "How many ships are we detecting?" Kextar demanded, his confidence evaporating. "Sir," the sensor operator's voice cracked with fear, "the computers are still counting. Current estimate is over 30,000 vessels, and more are appearing every second. 30,000 ships. But that was impossible. The humans had been trapped in their system for 3 centuries. They had no access to the resource networks that made such massive fleets possible. Where had they gotten the materials, the technology, the population to crew such a force? "All fleets, battle stations," Kextar shouted. "Prepare for immediate attack." But the human ships did not attack. They simply surrounded the Confederation fleet, moving with a coordination that spoke of decades of practice. Their formation was perfect, their positioning flawless. It was like watching a dance that had been choreographed by master strategists. Admiral Chen's voice filled the communications channel again. "Admiral Kextar, I want you to understand something. For 300 years your people taught us that might makes right, that the strong deserve to rule over the weak, that expansion and conquest are natural laws. Thank you for the education. The largest human vessels were barely recognizable as ships at all. They were vast entities that dwarfed entire Confederation battle groups, their hulls stretching for kilometers. As Kextar watched in growing horror, one of these massive ships began to demonstrate its capabilities. It phased. That was the only word for what happened. The enormous vessel became translucent, then transparent, then invisible to all sensors. But it was still there. Kextar could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on his consciousness. "Impossible," he whispered. "Nothing that large can use stealth technology." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet, but the signatures don't match any known weapon systems." "What kind of energy? Buildups?" Kextar demanded. I don't know, sir. The computers can't classify them. It's like they're using physics we don't understand." The first demonstration of human capabilities was almost gentle. A Confederation destroyer at the edge of the formation simply stopped working. Its weapons, powered down, its shields flickered and died. Its engines went silent. But there was no damage, no explosion, no sign of attack. "Status report from the Stellar Hammer," Kextar shouted. "Sir, Captain Velkoth reports that all systems have been overridden. His ship is responding to commands from the human fleet instead of his own bridge crew. But his crew is unharmed." More ships began to experience the same phenomenon. One by one, Confederation vessels found their systems no longer responding to their own commands. Their weapons turned away from human targets. Their shields reconfigured to protect nearby human ships instead of themselves. Their navigation systems began following courses plotted by human computers. "They're not destroying us," Admiral Zexara transmitted, her voice filled with confusion. "They're capturing us without firing a shot." Kextar watched his mighty fleet become puppets dancing to human commands. This was not warfare, as he understood. This was something entirely new, a form of combat that turned an enemy's strength against them without causing death or destruction. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. Admiral Chen's voice answered, as if she had heard his question. "We had 300 years to study your technology, Admiral. Every ship you sent to maintain our blockade, every probe you used to monitor our activities, every communication relay you established near our space. We learned from all of it." The truth hit Kextar like a physical blow. The blockade hadn't just kept humans trapped, it had given them a classroom. For 3 centuries, they had been studying Confederation technology, finding its weaknesses, learning to exploit its vulnerabilities. But more importantly, Admiral Chen continued, we learned to build something better. Our ships don't just use technology, they integrate with it. Every vessel in our fleet is partially alive, capable of evolving and adapting in real time. A human ship approached Kextar's flagship, moving with impossible grace. As it drew closer, he could see that its hull was indeed alive, a hybrid of metal and organic tissue that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Weapons that looked more like organs than machines tracked his ship's movements. "Your people made a critical error," Admiral Chen said. "You assumed that being isolated would make us weaker. Instead, it forced us to become completely self-reliant. We had to invent everything from scratch. New sciences, new technologies, new ways of thinking about the universe itself." The human ship extended what looked like a tendril toward Kextar's flagship. Where it made contact, the Confederation vessel's hull began to change, taking on the same organic appearance. The transformation spread slowly but inexorably, converting cold metal into warm, living tissue. "We don't want to destroy you," Admiral Chen said, her voice now coming from Kextar's own communication systems. "Destruction is wasteful. Instead, we're going to teach you what we learned during our isolation." Kextar tried to give orders, but his ship no longer obeyed him. The bridge systems responded to commands he never gave, displaying information he didn't understand. His crew looked to him for leadership. But what leadership could he provide against an enemy that had made his own vessel their ally? "You came here to commit genocide," Admiral Chen continued, "to wipe out an entire species because you needed someone to blame for your own failures. But we're going to show you something better. Across the Confederation fleet, the same process was occurring. Human ships approached, made contact, and began the slow transformation of their former enemies. It was not an invasion or a conquest. It was an integration. "What do you want from us?" Kextar finally asked. "Nothing," Admiral Chen replied. "We want to give you something instead. We want to give you the gift we received during our exile, the opportunity to become better than you were." The transformation of Kextar's ship was complete. He could feel its new awareness, its enhanced capabilities. The vessel was still his to command, but now it was also something more, a living entity that could think and adapt and grow. "Your fleet will return to Confederation space," Admiral Chen said, "but you'll carry with you the seeds of change. Every ship, every crew member, every officer will remember this moment. They'll remember that there is an alternative to conquest and domination." As the human fleet began to withdraw, Kextar found himself able to move and speak freely again. His ship responded to his commands, but he could sense the changes that had been made. It was faster now, more efficient, somehow more alive than it had ever been. "This isn't over," he called out, though his words lacked conviction. "No, Admiral," Chen agreed. "It's just beginning." The last thing Kextar saw before the human ships disappeared was Earth itself, hanging peacefully in space. But now he understood that the blue-green world was not humanity's prison. It was their garden, and they had spent 3 centuries learning to make it bloom. The Confederation had come to Sol System expecting to find victims. Instead, they had found gardeners who understood that the greatest victory was helping others grow. The Zephyrian High Command Chamber had never seen such chaos. Emergency lights flashed red across the crystalline walls, while dozens of military officials shouted over each other in panic. Fleet Admiral Kextar stood at the center of the storm, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides as he tried to explain what had happened. "Say that again," Supreme Commander Thexara demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Slowly this time." Kextar took a deep breath. "The human fleet disabled our entire force without destroying a single ship or killing a single crew member. They transformed our vessels, made them better. Then they let us go." "Let you go?" Thexara's eyes blazed with fury. "You led 12,000 ships into battle against a handful of primitives, and they let you go." "Supreme Commander," Kextar said quietly, "they weren't primitives. They have technology that operates beyond our understanding of physics. Ships that think for themselves, weapons that turn enemy vessels into allies. They could have destroyed us completely, but they chose mercy instead." The chamber fell silent. Mercy was not a concept that military commanders dealt with often. Wars were won or lost. Enemies were defeated or victorious. The idea that someone might choose not to use overwhelming force was almost incomprehensible. "How many ships did they have?" Thexara asked. "Our sensors counted over 50,000 vessels, but more kept appearing. I believe the actual number might be closer to 100,000. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 100,000 ships was more than the entire Confederation military combined. It represented a level of industrial capacity that should have been impossible for a species trapped in a single solar system. "Where did they get the resources?" Admiral Velcane demanded. "The raw materials alone would require mining operations across dozens of star systems." Kextar activated a holographic display showing the Sol system as his fleet had found it. They turned their entire solar system into a factory. Every asteroid is a mining platform or manufacturing center. Every moon houses populations in the millions. They've built a civilization in space itself. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just survived their imprisonment. They had used it to bootstrap themselves into a post-planetary society. While other species fought over worlds and territories, humans had claimed the vastness of space itself. "What are our options?" Thexara asked. "Militarily? Kextar shook his head. None. They could appear in orbit around any Confederation world, tomorrow if they chose to. Our defensive fleets would be as helpless against them as we were. But even as the Zephyrian High Command grappled with their defeat, humanity was already moving to the next phase of their plan. Across the galaxy, single human ships began appearing in orbit around major Confederation worlds. They made no aggressive moves. They did not demand surrender or issue ultimatums. They simply appeared, floating serenely in the space above planets that had never seen an uninvited guest penetrate their defensive networks. On the Craxi homeworld, Admiral Zexara rushed to her command center as alarms blared throughout the military district. Status report! Ma'am, a human vessel has appeared in high orbit, her tactical officer reported. No weapons detected, no hostile actions. It's just sitting there. How did it get past our defense grid? That's the problem, ma'am. Our defenses never detected it. As far as our sensors are concerned, it materialized out of nothing. Admiral Zexara studied the displays showing the human ship. It was smaller than she had expected, perhaps the size of a corvette. But after what Kextar had described, she knew that size meant nothing when dealing with human technology. Open a communication channel, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the human vessel. A young woman in a simple uniform smiled politely from what looked like a living room rather than a military bridge. Good morning, Admiral, the human said. I'm Commander Lisa Park of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. I hope we're not causing too much alarm. Diplomatic Corps? Zexara was confused. You're invading our space with military vessels. Oh, this isn't a military vessel, Commander Park replied cheerfully. The Gentle Breeze is a diplomatic courier ship, though I suppose the distinction might not be immediately obvious to your sensors. The casual way she spoke was more unsettling than any threat could have been. This human commander was sitting in orbit around the Craxi capital world, completely alone, talking as if she were visiting friends for lunch. What do you want? Zexara asked. Commander Park held up a small potted plant, a flower with delicate pink petals. I have a gift for your planetary leadership. This is a rose from Earth. It's engineered to grow in any atmosphere, any soil conditions. I thought your people might enjoy having something beautiful from our world. A flower? Zexara stared at the screen. You violated our airspace to deliver a flower? Well, that and a message, Commander Park replied. May I transmit it to your planetary communication network? Against her better judgment, Zexara found herself nodding. The message that followed was broadcast to every screen, every communication device, every data terminal on the Craxi homeworld. It was Admiral Chen's voice, calm and measured. People of Craxi Prime, your military commanders declared war on humanity without consulting you. They intended to commit genocide in your name. We want you to know that we hold no anger toward your people for the actions of your leaders. War is a choice made by the few and suffered by the many. We choose differently. The message continued with a simple offer. Any Craxi citizen who wished to visit human space would be welcome. Cultural exchanges, educational programs, and trade opportunities were all available to anyone interested in learning about humanity's development during their isolation. You're trying to turn our people against their own government, Zexara accused. Not at all, Commander Park replied. We're offering them alternatives to the path their leaders have chosen. What they do with that information is entirely up to them. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On Centaura Prime, a human diplomatic ship delivered seeds that could restore the planet's damaged ecosystem. On Ethereal 7th, humans offered medical technology that could extend the lifespan of the gaseous beings by centuries. On dozens of worlds, the same pattern emerged. Humans appearing not as conquerors, but as teachers and healers. The psychological impact was devastating to Confederation leadership. Their populations began asking uncomfortable questions. If humanity had such advanced technology, why were they offering to share it freely? If they had such powerful military capabilities, why were they using them to deliver flowers and medicine instead of weapons? Supreme Commander Thexara called an emergency session of the Confederation War Council. Representatives from every major species gathered in the secure communication chamber, their faces grim with the realization that their grand war had become something entirely different. "The humans have made fools of us all," Thexara began. "They've demonstrated that our military might is worthless against them, and now they're undermining our authority with our own populations. My people are demanding to know why we declared war on species offering medical aid," reported the Centauran delegate. "The humans cured a plague that had been ravaging our outer colonies for decades. They did it in 3 days. The same on Ethereal 7th, another representative added. They shared atmospheric processing technology that will double our usable living space. Our citizens are calling them saviors, not enemies." "This is psychological warfare," Thexara insisted. "They're trying to make us look like the aggressors." "Aren't we?" The question came from Admiral Velcane, and it silenced the chamber. "We declared war on them. We invaded their space. We came with the explicit intention of committing genocide. How are we not the aggressors?" The uncomfortable truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Confederation had initiated this conflict based on fear and the need for a scapegoat. Humanity had simply defended themselves, then offered friendship to the very people who had tried to exterminate them. "What do you propose we do?" Thexara asked. "We could try negotiating," Velcane suggested. "The humans seem reasonable. Perhaps we could reach some kind of accord." "Negotiating?" Thexara's voice rose to a shriek. "We are the Galactic Confederation. We do not negotiate with species that were supposed to be extinct." But even as she spoke, reports were coming in from across Confederation space. Human ships were appearing everywhere, not as an invasion force, but as a relief effort. They brought solutions to problems that had plagued various species for generations: clean energy that could reverse climate damage, food production techniques that could end starvation, transportation technology that made interstellar travel accessible to everyone. The most unsettling reports came from the border worlds, planets that had been ravaged by the recent territorial conflicts. Human medical ships had appeared in those systems, offering aid to refugees regardless of their species or political affiliation. They treated Craxi and Zephyrian casualties side by side, asking no questions about the wars that had wounded them. "They're making us irrelevant," Thexara realized. "If the humans can provide everything our member species need, why do they need the Confederation at all?" It was a question that populations across the galaxy were beginning to ask. Why maintain expensive military forces when humanity offered protection through their mere existence? Why struggle with resource shortages when humans freely shared technology that made such problems obsolete? The final blow came when human ships appeared simultaneously in orbit around every Confederation capital world, not to attack or threaten, but to extend a formal invitation. Admiral Chen's image appeared on every government communication system in the galaxy. "Leaders of the Galactic Confederation, you declared war on humanity with the intention of uniting your people against a common enemy. But unity built on hatred and fear is fragile. Unity built on shared goals and mutual benefit lasts forever. We invite you to visit Earth and see what we have built during our isolation. Not as defeated enemies or conquered subjects, but as neighbors who might learn something valuable from each other. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to flourish, but only if we choose cooperation over conquest. The choice, as always, is yours." The transmission ended, leaving the Confederation leadership to grapple with an impossible situation. They had declared war on what they thought was the weakest species in the galaxy, only to discover that humanity had become the strongest. More than that, humanity had become something the galaxy had never seen before: a post-scarcity civilization. That measured success not by what they could take, but by what they could give. The war that was supposed to last days had ended in hours, but the transformation it would bring to galactic civilization was only just beginning. Supreme Commander, Thexara sat alone in her office, staring at the small potted rose that a human diplomatic courier had left on her desk. Despite everything, despite her anger and humiliation and fear, she found herself admiring the delicate beauty of the flower. It was, she realized, the most perfect metaphor for what humanity had become during their exile. They had taken the seeds of their own destruction and used them to bloom into something the galaxy had never imagined possible. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was wise enough to learn from their example. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. The Great Assembly Hall on Centaura Prime buzzed with activity as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what historians would later call the Reformation Convention, where, once there had been the Galactic Confederation's sterile council chamber, now there was something alive and welcoming. The hall itself had been transformed using human biotechnology. Living walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns that responded to the emotions of the speakers. Seating arrangements flowed like organic structures, ensuring that every delegate could see and hear clearly, regardless of their species' physical requirements. The air was clean and rich, maintained by photosynthetic panels that turned the breath of hundreds of beings into pure oxygen. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, no longer wearing the utilitarian uniform of the Terran Defense Force. Instead, she wore simple civilian clothes that spoke of humanity's evolution beyond military necessity. Around her, delegates from 47 species waited to hear what she had to say. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying clearly through translation systems that now worked with perfect precision thanks to human linguistic technology. "6 months ago, your leaders declared war on my species. Today we gather not as enemies, but as neighbors exploring what we might build together." The transformation had not been easy. In the weeks following humanity's demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority, panic had swept through Confederation space. Stock markets collapsed as military contractors realized their products were obsolete. Governments struggled to maintain order as their populations questioned why resources had been wasted on weapons when humanity offered solutions to every problem. But panic had given way to wonder as human aid ships continued their work throughout the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working side by side in human-designed relief stations. Technologies that had been guarded secrets for generations were freely shared through human information networks. Most importantly, problems that had seemed unsolvable began to find answers. "The Craxian food shortage has been eliminated, Admiral," Chen continued, gesturing to where Admiral Thexara sat among the delegates. "Vertical farming techniques developed in our asteroid colonies now feed billions of beings across 12 star systems. The ethereal energy crisis has been resolved through fusion reactors that fit in cargo containers. The Centauran ecological collapse has been reversed using atmospheric processors originally designed for our Martian terraforming projects." Each success story represented more than just technological advancement. They represented a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization thought about resources and cooperation. Scarcity, the driving force behind millennia of conflict, was becoming a thing of the past. Dr. Amara Okafor approached the podium, carrying a datapad filled with statistics that would have seemed impossible just months before. Production across the galaxy has increased by 400%, while resource consumption has decreased by 60%. Unemployment has virtually disappeared as beings transition to work that focuses on creativity, education, and exploration rather than mere survival. The numbers told an incredible story. Worlds that had struggled to feed their populations now produced surplus food for export. Species that had fought over mining rights now had access to asteroid-based resources that dwarfed anything available on planetary surfaces. Most remarkably, crime rates had plummeted as the desperation born of scarcity gave way to the security of abundance. But statistics only tell part of the story, Dr. Okafor continued. The real transformation has been cultural. For the first time in recorded galactic history, species are choosing cooperation over competition not because they have to, but because they want to. Supreme Commander Thexara rose from her seat, her bearing no longer that of a military leader, but of someone seeking understanding. Admiral Chen, your people have given us gifts beyond measure, but many of our populations want to know. What do you want in return? It was the question that had puzzled galactic leaders for months. Humanity's post-scarcity technology made traditional trade meaningless. They didn't need resources, territory, or labor. They had demonstrated military capabilities that made conquest impossible. So what did they want? Admiral Chen smiled, the same expression that had unnerved Confederation leaders months before. But now it seemed warm and inviting rather than mysterious. We want what we've always wanted, Supreme Commander. We want to grow. We want to learn. We want to explore the universe and discover what's possible when intelligent beings work together instead of against each other. She gestured toward the vast window that dominated one wall of the assembly hall. Through the transparent aluminum, the delegates could see Centauri Prime's restored ecosystem. Forests that had been dead for centuries now bloomed with earth roses, growing alongside native plants. The sky was clear for the first time in generations, painted with colors that spoke of a world healing itself. During our exile, we learned something important, Admiral Chen continued. The greatest discoveries, the most beautiful creations, the most profound achievements, they all come from collaboration. A single species, no matter how advanced, can only see the universe from one perspective. But together, we can see everything. To illustrate her point, she activated a holographic display that filled the center of the assembly hall. It showed a map of the galaxy, but not as it had ever been seen before. Instead of the traditional political boundaries and territorial claims, it displayed the flow of ideas, resources, and knowledge that now connected every inhabited system. The ethereal gaseous beings had contributed understanding of energy manipulation that complemented human biotechnology. Craxi hive mind insights had revolutionized human computer networks. Centauran artistic traditions had inspired new forms of human expression. Even the most isolated species had something valuable to offer. The growing galactic community. This is what we want, Admiral Chen said, her voice filled with genuine emotion. We want to be part of something larger than any one species could create alone. We want to explore distant galaxies, not as conquerors, but as teachers and students. We want to solve the mysteries of the universe, not for glory, but for the joy of understanding. Commander Lisa Park approached the podium, carrying a collection of items that represented the new reality of galactic civilization. There was a crystal that had been grown using Zephyrian techniques, but powered by human energy systems. A piece of art that combined ethereal light shaping with Craxi structural engineering and human organic design. A medical device that used Centauran biotechnology enhanced with human nanotechnology. These aren't human inventions, Commander Park explained. They're galactic inventions, created by teams that include beings from dozens of species, each contributing their unique perspective and knowledge. This is what becomes possible when we choose cooperation over conquest. The assembly hall fell silent as delegates contemplated what they were seeing. This was not the galaxy they had grown up in, where species guarded their secrets and viewed neighbors as potential threats. This was something entirely new, a civilization based on sharing rather than hoarding, on growth rather than dominance. Fleet Admiral Kextar stood slowly, his forearms spread in a gesture of openness. Admiral Chen, I led the fleet that came to destroy your people. I expected to find weakness and instead found strength beyond imagining. But more than that, I found something I had never seen before, a species that chose to help their enemies instead of destroying them. His voice carried across the assembly hall with the weight of personal transformation. My ship, like all the vessels in our invasion fleet, was changed by human technology. But the technology was not the real gift. The real gift was the understanding that there is always a choice. We can choose to see others as enemies to be conquered or as neighbors to be helped. The Reformation Convention continued for days, with delegates from every species sharing their experiences of the past 6 months. The stories were remarkably similar despite the vast differences between the species telling them. Everywhere, humanity's intervention had brought not just technological solutions, but hope for a better future. The final session took place under an artificial aurora created by ethereal light shapers working with human atmospheric engineers. As the dancing lights painted the assembly hall in colors that had no names in any language, Admiral Chen delivered her closing address. 6 months ago, you declared war on humanity because you needed someone to blame for your problems, she said. But problems are not solved by finding someone to blame. They are solved by finding someone willing to help. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces representing dozens of species that had once been enemies. Today, we established not a confederation, based on mutual defense, or an empire based on conquest, but a community based on mutual aid. A galaxy where the strength of each species lifts up all the others. The new galactic community charter that emerged from the convention was unlike any governing document in galactic history. Instead of defining territories and military obligations, it defined principles of cooperation and mutual support. Instead of establishing hierarchies and power structures, it created networks of shared knowledge and resources. Most importantly, it enshrined the lesson that humanity had learned during their 3 centuries of exile, that the greatest victory was not defeating your enemies, but helping them become better than they were. As the delegates prepared to return to their home, worlds each carried with them more than just agreements and treaties. They carried seeds, literal and metaphorical. Earth roses that would bloom in alien soil, human technologies that would solve local problems, and most importantly, the understanding that cooperation created possibilities that competition could never achieve. Admiral Chen stood at the window of her transport ship as it departed Centaura Prime, watching the planet grow smaller in the distance. The world that had once been dying was now vibrant with life, its cities gleaming with the integrated architecture that combined the best of dozen species technologies. What happens now? Dr. Okafor asked, joining her at the window. Now we grow, Admiral Chen replied. All of us together. We have a galaxy to explore, mysteries to solve, and wonders to create. And for the first time in galactic history, we're going to do it as one people instead of 47 separate species. As their ship entered hyperspace, bound for Earth and the continuation of humanity's greatest experiment, Admiral Chen reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The Confederation had tried to cage humanity, believing that isolation would make them weak. Instead, they had given humanity the greatest gift possible, time to learn that the universe was not something to be conquered, but something to be tended. Like gardeners in the vast cosmic greenhouse, they had discovered that the most beautiful flowers grew when many hands worked together to help them bloom. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, expecting to end a threat. Instead, they had awakened, gardeners who understood that the greatest harvest came from helping others flourish. And now, together, they would plant seeds among the stars that would bloom for generations to come. The war was over. The garden was just beginning.
The stars looked different from space. Jack Stone knew this well after 3 years as captain of the research vessel Horizon. Earth had finally reached beyond its own borders, sending ships to the closest stars to learn what was out there. Humanity was taking its first real steps into the galaxy. Jack stood on the bridge of his ship looking at the main screen. His crew of 30 moved around him, checking readings and talking in low voices. The Horizon wasn't big or fancy, but it was a good ship with good people. "Captain," called Mike from his station. "I'm picking up something strange." Jack walked over. Mike was the best sensor operator in the fleet. If he said something was strange, it was worth paying attention to. "What do you have?" Mike pointed to his screen. "This energy reading, I've never seen anything like it. It's massive and it's coming this way. Fast." Before Jack could answer, the lights on the bridge flickered. The main screen went dark for a moment, then came back on, showing something that made Jack's blood run cold. A ship. No, not just a ship. A monster. It was huge, at least 20 times bigger than the Horizon, black as the space around it and shaped like a long, sharp pyramid. It moved without any visible engines, without any light or heat that their sensors could detect. "What is that?" whispered Anna, the ship's doctor. No one had an answer. Humanity had never encountered alien life before. Despite years of searching, "Open communications," Jack ordered. "All channels, all languages we have." Tom, the ship's engineer, tried to send their standard greeting message. Nothing happened. "They're not responding, sir." Jack felt something he hadn't felt in years. Real fear. "Get us out of here, maximum speed." The Horizon turned and its engines fired, pushing the ship away from the massive object. For a moment, Jack thought they might escape. Then the ship shuddered. The engines screamed, but the Horizon didn't move forward. Instead, it began to slide backward toward the black ship. "We're caught in some kind of pull," shouted Tom. "The engines can't break free." Jack watched helplessly as his ship was dragged toward the alien vessel. The black ship opened like a giant mouth, revealing a glowing interior. The Horizon was pulled inside, and the mouth closed behind them. The lights went out. Emergency power came on, bathing the bridge in red light. "Everyone, stay calm," Jack said, though his own heart was racing. "We don't know who they are or what they want. They might be peaceful." The ship shuddered again. A loud hissing sound filled the air. Jack smelled something sweet, and then his eyes grew heavy. The last thing he saw before he fell unconscious was a section of the wall melting away, and tall figures moving through the opening. Jack woke up with a pounding headache. He was lying on a cold metal floor in a room with no windows. The walls glowed with a faint blue light that seemed to come from nowhere. His uniform was gone, replaced by a simple gray jumpsuit. Around his neck was a heavy metal collar. He sat up slowly, fighting off waves of dizziness. He wasn't alone. 20 other humans were in the room with him, all wearing the same gray jumpsuits and metal collars. Some he recognized from his crew. Others were strangers. "Captain," a voice said. Jack turned to see Tom sitting against a wall nearby. "You're awake." "What happened?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "Where are we?" "We're on the alien ship," Tom said. "They took the whole crew. I think there are people from other Earth ships, too." Before Jack could ask more questions, one of the walls simply disappeared. Standing there were the aliens. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with 6 limbs, 4 arms and 2 legs. Their bodies were covered in scales that shifted color like oil on water. Their heads reminded Jack of praying mantises with large compound eyes and small moving parts around what might have been mouths. One of the aliens stepped forward. It wore some kind of device on its upper left arm. When it spoke, the device translated its clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless English. "Stand when your masters enter," it said. No one moved. The alien pressed something on a small device it held. Suddenly, the collar around Jack's neck burned with pain. He fell to his knees, gasping. Around him, the other humans were doing the same. "Stand when your masters enter," the alien repeated. Fighting through the pain, Jack forced himself to his feet. The others did the same. As soon as they were all standing, the pain stopped. "Better," the alien said. "You learn quickly for simple animals." "We're not animals," Jack said, his voice stronger now. "We're human beings. We have rights. We—" The pain came again, worse this time. Jack bit his tongue to keep from screaming. The taste of blood filled his mouth. "Tools do not speak unless asked a question," the alien said. "You are property of the Dominion now. You will work, you will obey, or you will die." The pain stopped. Jack remained standing, though his legs shook with the effort. "I am Overseer First Class," the alien said. "You will address me as Master. You will now be evaluated for your usefulness." Over the next few hours, the humans were taken one by one into another room. When they returned, they looked shaken. When Jack's turn came, he was led into a clinical white room where 3 aliens waited. They didn't speak to him. They poked and prodded him with instruments that sometimes hurt. They took samples of his blood, his hair, even scraping cells from the inside of his cheek. They tested his strength by making him lift increasingly heavy objects until he couldn't anymore. They tested his intelligence with puzzles that grew more complex. Through it all, they spoke to each other in their clicking language, not bothering to translate. They treated him like a farmer might examine a horse or cow he was thinking of buying. When they were done, they put a mark on his jumpsuit, a symbol in their language. Then they returned him to the holding room. This continued for days. More humans were brought in, some Jack recognized from news reports as crews from other Earth ships. All wore the same blank expressions, the same gray jumpsuits, the same metal collars. From bits of conversation he managed to overhear, Jack learned that the aliens, the Dominion, had hit Earth hard and fast. Millions of humans had been taken already. The Dominion saw humans as nothing more than clever animals, good for labor in their vast empire. On the 6th day, the humans were split into groups based on the markings on their jumpsuits. Jack watched as his people were taken away one by one. Anna, his doctor, gave him one last desperate look before she was led through a doorway. Mike tried to run back to the group and was dropped by the pain from his collar, then dragged away, unconscious. Finally, only Jack and Tom remained from the original Horizon crew, along with about 30 strangers. "Listen to me," Jack whispered to Tom as they waited their turn. "This isn't the end. Remember who we are, what we've survived as a species. Don't let them break you." Tom's eyes were dull with pain and fear, but he nodded. "What are you thinking, Captain?" Jack looked around to make sure no Dominion were watching. "They think we're animals. That's their mistake. The wall vanished again. A new overseer entered, this one with red markings on its scales. "Mining unit, follow," it ordered. As Jack and Tom were led away with the others, Jack caught Tom's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. The Dominion had made a critical error. They had studied human biology but had completely misunderstood human psychology. They didn't understand human resilience, ingenuity, or our capacity for both cooperation and calculated vengeance when pushed too far. They didn't understand that calling humans slaves was the beginning of their end. As they were loaded onto a transport ship bound for some distant mining world, Jack made a promise to himself. He would survive. He would find a way to fight back, and someday the Dominion would regret the day they ever came to Earth. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. They called us slaves. We burned their armies to ash. Dangerous Ship Part 2. The Awakening. 3 years had passed since Earth fell to the Dominion. 3 years of pain, hard work, and careful watching. Jack had been moved between 5 different mining operations. Each one was worse than the last. Now he worked in the engine rooms of a massive Dominion warship called the Subjugator. The name made Jack smile in a bitter way. The Dominion liked names that showed their power. They didn't realize how much humans hated being subjugated, or how dangerous that hatred could become. Jack's job was simple but hard. He cleaned the massive engines that powered the ship. The work was hot and the air was full of chemicals that burned his lungs. His hands were covered in burns and cuts that never fully healed. The Dominion didn't care if their slaves got hurt, as long as they could still work. "Move faster, tool," said a Dominion overseer, clicking his pincer-like hands together. All Dominion called humans tools instead of people. It was their way of showing that humans weren't real beings to them, just things to be used. Jack kept his eyes down and moved faster. He had learned when to push back and when to obey. Today was a day for obeying. He had more important things to do than fight with an overseer. The work shift lasted 12 hours. When it was done, Jack and the other engine room workers were marched to the feeding area. The food was a gray paste that tasted like nothing. It had all the things a human body needed to stay alive, but nothing more. Jack ate quickly, not wasting time. As he finished, someone bumped into him. It was Tom. After 3 years, Tom looked different. He was thinner, with gray in his hair even though he was only 35. But his eyes still had the same sharp look they'd had on the horizon. "Waste management needs help," Tom said loudly, for the benefit of any Dominion who might be listening. "You've been reassigned for 2 hours." Jack nodded and followed Tom. This wasn't unusual. Slaves were often moved around to different jobs when needed. The Dominion didn't care which human did what job as long as the work got done. They walked through the huge ship's corridors. The Subjugator was one of the biggest ships in the Dominion fleet. It had 20 levels and could carry thousands of Dominion troops. It also had about 500 human slaves who did all the dirty, dangerous work the Dominion didn't want to do. When they were in a service tunnel where no Dominion ever went, Tom stopped. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice low. Jack looked around to make sure they were alone, then reached into a hidden pocket he had made in his jumpsuit. He pulled out a small metal object that looked like a broken piece of engine, but it wasn't broken. Jack had made it, piece by piece, over many weeks. "It works?" Tom asked. Jack nodded. "I tested it on myself yesterday. It blocks the collar's signal for about 30 seconds. Tom smiled. It was a hard smile, not happy, but determined. "That's enough time. Kate says she's ready too." Kate Wilson had been a nurse before the Dominion came. Now she worked in medical disposal, getting rid of waste from the Dominion medical bay. She had been slowly collecting medicines that could be used as sedatives or poisons. "How many people do we have now?" Jack asked. 32, Tom said. "All have been practicing the pain control techniques. All are ready to move when we give the signal." The pain control techniques had been Tom's discovery. The collars worked by causing pain when a human disobeyed. But Tom had found that with practice, a human mind could separate itself from the pain. It didn't stop the pain, but it let a person think and act even while hurting. It wasn't easy, and not everyone could do it. But those who could had a weapon the Dominion didn't know about. "And the ship systems?" Jack asked. Tom's smile grew wider. "Robert says he can do it. He needs 10 minutes at a control panel, but once he's in, he can lock down sections of the ship and control the air." Robert Davis had been a scientist before the Dominion came. He'd spent 3 years studying the ship while working as a hull cleaner. The Dominion never worried about slaves learning their technology. Why would they? In their minds, humans were just smart animals. They didn't expect animals to understand complex systems. That was their biggest mistake. "We move in 3 days, Jack said. "When we dock at Station 4, security will be focused on the station, not on us." Tom nodded. "I'll tell the others." 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. They had developed a simple tap code to communicate. 1 tap on a wall or floor meant yes, 2 meant no. 3 rapid taps meant danger. It was simple but effective. The Dominion never noticed or cared when slaves tapped on things. As they talked, they heard footsteps. Quickly, Tom pretended to be showing Jack how to fix a waste pipe. A moment later, a Dominion technician walked by. It barely looked at them. Slaves fixing things was normal. Nothing to worry about. When the technician was gone, Jack put the signal blocker back in his hidden pocket. "We only get 1 chance at this," he said. "If we fail, we won't." Tom cut him off. "Everyone knows what's at stake." What was at stake was more than just their lives. It was the future of humanity. In 3 years, the Dominion had taken millions of humans from Earth. They were spread across dozens of worlds and ships working as slaves. If Jack and the others could take this ship, They could start fighting back. They could begin freeing other humans. They could show the Dominion that taking humans as slaves had been the worst mistake in their long history. Later that night, Jack lay on his thin sleeping mat in the slave quarters. Around him, 20 other men slept or pretended to sleep. The lights were never fully off in slave areas. The Dominion wanted to be able to see what their tools were doing at all times. Jack thought about Earth, about the blue sky and green trees, about the taste of real food and the feeling of rain on his face. He wondered if he would ever see his homeworld again. Then he thought about the plan. It was dangerous. Many of them would probably die. But they had no choice. Living as slaves wasn't really living at all. The next day passed slowly. Jack did his work and kept his head down. He managed to speak briefly with Kate when they crossed paths in a corridor. "Medical bay is ready," she whispered as she passed. "The ventilation system will carry the sedative to the Dominion quarters." Jack gave a small nod. Kate was brave. She had lost her husband when the Dominion first attacked Earth. She had nothing left to lose, which made her both dangerous and valuable. That night, a young human named Dan died in the engine room. He had been worked too hard for too long, and his heart simply stopped. The Dominion overseer had the body taken to waste disposal. To the Dominion, a dead slave was just broken equipment. As Jack watched Dan's body being dragged away, something hardened inside him. Dan had been just 20 years old. He should have had his whole life ahead of him. Instead, he died cleaning alien engines, treated as less than nothing. That night, Jack called together his core group: Tom, Kate, Robert, and Ben. Ben Wright had been a chef before the Dominion came. Now he worked in food preparation and had been collecting sharp implements that could be used as weapons. They met in a small maintenance space between walls, where the Dominion never went. "Dan's death changes things," Jack said. "We move tomorrow, not in 3 days." "But the ship won't be docked," Robert said. "Security will be higher." "Security is always watching the outside," Jack replied. "They never think the danger will come from inside, from slaves." He looked at each of them in turn. These people had been through hell. They were thin, scarred, and tired. But in their eyes, Jack saw something the Dominion had never understood about humans: unbreakable determination. "They think we're animals," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they've never seen what happens when humans decide that just surviving isn't enough. When we decide that freedom is worth dying for." Tom nodded. "I can get the signal blockers to 30 people by morning." "That's all we need to start." Kate held up a small vial of clear liquid. "This goes into the ventilation system. It will make them slow, confused. Not all will sleep, but it will help." Ben showed a piece of metal he had sharpened to a deadly point. "We're ready." Jack looked at them all and felt for the first time in 3 years a spark of hope. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take back our future." Morning came too quickly. Jack hadn't slept much. His mind kept going over the plan, looking for problems, thinking of solutions. By the time the lights brightened in the slave quarters, he was already awake and ready. The Dominion guards came, as they always did, clicking and whistling at the humans to get up. Jack stood with his head down, playing the part of the broken slave. Inside, his heart beat fast with fear and excitement. Today everything would change, one way or another. At the morning meal, Tom walked past Jack's table and dropped something small into his hand. The signal blocker. Jack slipped it into his hidden pocket without looking at it. Around the room, he saw other small exchanges happening. Their core team was passing out the devices to the 30 people they had chosen for the first wave. Each person had been picked carefully. They were the strongest, the smartest, or the most determined. They were people who could keep fighting even when things got bad. And things would get bad. Jack had no illusions about that. After the meal, the slaves went to their workstations. Jack and 5 others went to the engine room. The big Dominion overseer was already there, moving around on his 6 legs, checking that everything was running correctly. "You, Tool," the overseer said to Jack. Clean the coolant pipes, they're running hot. Jack nodded and went to the tool locker. As he selected a cleaning tool, he looked at the other humans in the room. 3 of them had signal blockers. They were part of the plan. The other 2 didn't know anything about it. It was safer that way. If someone was caught and questioned, they couldn't tell what they didn't know. Jack began cleaning the coolant pipes. The work was hot and dangerous. If a pipe burst, the coolant would burn through human skin in seconds. The Dominion didn't care. If a slave died, they just got another one. As he worked, Jack waited for the right moment. The plan would start at exactly 1200 ship time. That was when the watch changed for the Dominion guards, and when Kate would put the sedative into the ventilation system. The minutes ticked by slowly. Jack's hands moved automatically, cleaning the pipes while his mind focused on the time. 11 Rambadi. 11:55, 11:59. At exactly 1200, Jack pressed the small button on his signal blocker. The device made a soft humming sound. The collar around his neck grew warm, then cool. For 30 seconds it wouldn't work. For 30 seconds, he was free. Across the engine room, 3 other humans pressed their blockers at the same time. In that moment, the overseer turned, sensing something was wrong. He reached for the control that would activate all the collars in the room. He was too late. Jack was already moving, the heavy wrench in his hand swinging hard. It connected with the overseer's head with a sickening crunch. The alien made a high-pitched sound of pain and surprise, then fell to the floor. The 2 humans who weren't part of the plan stared in shock. One started to back away. "Listen to me," Jack said quickly. "We're taking the ship. You can help us or you can stay here, but we're not slaves anymore." One of the men nodded immediately. The other hesitated, then said, "The collars." "We have a way to block them," Jack said. "But we need to move fast." He went to the overseer's body and took the collar control device. With it, he could turn off the collars of anyone nearby. It wouldn't work for the whole ship, but it was better than nothing. "Mark, guard the door," Jack said to one of the men with a blocker. "The rest of you, with me." They left the engine room and moved quickly through the service tunnels. These narrow passages were used for maintenance and weren't monitored as closely as the main corridors. The humans who kept the ship running knew them well. At a junction, they met another group led by Tom. There were 7 of them, all looking nervous but determined. "Medical team is in position," Tom reported. "Kate got the sedative into the system 10 minutes ago. Most of the Dominion in their quarters should be affected by now." "Robert?" Jack asked. "Already at the auxiliary control room with his team," Tom said. "Ben is leading a group to secure weapons." They moved on, staying in the service tunnels as much as possible. Twice they had to cross main corridors. Both times they saw Dominion walking around, but the aliens seemed slower than usual, their movements not as precise. The sedative was working. When they reached the auxiliary control room, they found it already secured. Robert and his team of 4 had taken out the 2 Dominion technicians who normally worked there. Robert himself was at the main console, his fingers moving quickly over the alien controls. "How's it going?" Jack asked. Robert didn't look up. "I'm in the system, but there are security locks I didn't expect. I need more time." "How much time?" 10 minutes. Maybe less." Jack nodded. "You've got 5. Tom, stay here and help him. The rest of you with me." Jack led his growing team toward the armory. Along the way, they met Ben's group, who had secured several Dominion weapons. The weapons were designed for beings with 6 limbs, but the humans had figured out how to use them, with just 2 arms. "Bridge is locked down," Ben reported. "The Dominion captain has called for security teams, but there's confusion. They don't understand what's happening." Jack smiled grimly. "They're about to figure it out." They reached the armory and found 2 Dominion guards outside. The guards saw the armed humans and raised their weapons, but they were slow from the sedative. The humans fired first. The Dominion weapons made a high-pitched whine, and beams of intense heat shot out. The guards fell, their scaled bodies smoking. With the armory secured, Jack distributed weapons to everyone who knew how to use them. Then he contacted Robert through a communication device taken from a fallen guard. How much longer? Done. Robert's voice came back. I have control of internal systems. I've sealed off sections of the ship with high Dominion presence and vented atmosphere in some critical areas. Casualties? Jack asked. Unknown but high, Robert replied. Most of the crew was caught by surprise. Between the sedative and the atmosphere venting, I estimate we've neutralized 60% of the Dominion on board. That still left hundreds of Dominion to deal with. But now the humans had weapons, control of critical systems, and the element of surprise. Most importantly, they had something the Dominion couldn't understand. A burning desire for freedom that made them willing to risk everything. Jack's team moved toward the bridge. Along the way, they freed more human slaves, quickly explaining the situation. Some joined them immediately. Others, too afraid or too broken by years of slavery, hid or ran. Jack didn't blame them. Freedom was a scary thing when you'd gotten used to having no choices. As they approached the bridge, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The Dominion were organizing a response. Jack's team took positions in the corridor leading to the bridge. They had the advantage of position, but the Dominion would have numbers. Whatever happens next, Jack told his people, remember that we've already won. We're not slaves anymore. We've proven that humans can't be broken. Then the first wave of Dominion security forces came around the corner, their weapons ready. The battle for the subjugator had begun. The fighting was fierce. The Dominion were trained soldiers, but they were confused and slowed by the sedative. The humans fought with the desperate energy of people who had nothing to lose. Slowly, the humans pushed forward toward the bridge. They lost people along the way. Good people who had survived years of slavery, only to die fighting for freedom. Jack mourned each one but kept moving. Their sacrifice couldn't be wasted. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors were sealed, but Robert, working from the auxiliary control room, overrode the locks. The doors slid open, and Jack led the charge inside. The bridge was large, with stations for 20 Dominion operators. Only 5 were present, along with the ship's captain, a large Dominion with gold markings on his scales. The captain stood. As the humans burst in, his posture showing shock rather than fear. You're making a mistake, the Dominion captain said, his translator making his clicks and whistles into flat English. You're nothing but primitive bipeds. You can't possibly operate a vessel of this complexity. Jack smiled as he pointed his weapon at the captain. Behind him, his people secured the rest of the bridge crew. That's the thing about humans, Jack said. We learn, we adapt, and we never ever forget who hurt us. The captain made a gesture, trying to activate something on his control panel. Jack fired his weapon. The beam hit the captain in the chest, burning a hole through his scaled body. The alien fell, dead before he hit the floor. Secure the rest of them, Jack ordered. Robert, what's our status? We control all critical systems, Robert's voice came through the communication device. Engineering, life support, weapons, engines, all ours. And the Dominion? Those who survived are trapped in sealed sections of the ship. They can't get out without our help, and they're running out of air. Jack nodded. It wasn't a clean victory. Many humans had died, and many Dominion as well. But the ship was theirs. For the first time in 3 years, humans controlled their own fate again. Set course away from Dominion space, Jack ordered. And send a message on all frequencies in every language we know. What message? Asked Anna, who had survived and now sat at the communication station. Jack looked around at the bridge at the faces of his people, former slaves who had taken their freedom back through courage and sacrifice. Tell them, he said, that the subjugator has a new name now. From this day forward, it's called Humanity's Vengeance, and we're just getting started. News of the Humanity's Vengeance spread through the Dominion Empire like wildfire, a warship taken by slaves. It was impossible, the Dominion leaders said. No species they had ever conquered had managed to overcome the neural collars, let alone master Dominion technology quickly enough to operate a warship. Yet the impossible had happened, and it was only the beginning. On the bridge of the renamed warship, Jack stood looking at a star map. The ship had been traveling at top speed for 2 weeks, staying away from known Dominion patrol routes. In that time, they had learned more about the ship's systems, with Robert leading teams of humans who studied the Dominion technology day and night. "Captain," Anna called from her station, "we're picking up a signal. It's a Dominion transport ship." Jack walked over to her station. The screen showed a large vessel moving slowly through space. It wasn't a warship, but a transport, the kind used to move slaves between worlds. "How many life forms aboard?" Jack asked. Anna checked the sensors. "About 2,000 Dominion crew and nearly 5,000 human life signs." Jack felt his heart beat faster. 5,000 humans, slaves being transported to some Dominion world to work and die for alien masters. "Battle stations," he ordered. "Tom, how are our weapons?" Tom, now the ship's weapons officer, checked his screen. "All systems ready. We can disable their engines with targeted shots." "Do it," Jack said. "But be careful. We don't want to hurt the humans on board." The Humanity's Vengeance moved into position behind the transport ship. The transport had sensors, but not very good ones. By the time they detected the warship approaching, it was too late. Tom fired the weapons. Beams of energy shot out, hitting the transport's engines with perfect accuracy. The transport slowed, then stopped, dead in space. "They're sending a distress signal," Anna reported. "Jam it," Jack ordered. "Robert, can you access their systems from here?" Robert, who had become the ship's systems expert, worked quickly at his station. "Yes, I think so. Their security isn't as good as a warship's. Give me 5 minutes." While Robert worked, the transport tried to restart its engines. It failed. "The Dominion crew was trapped. I'm in," Robert finally said. "I have control of their doors and life support." "Good," Jack said. "Open all the holding pens where they keep the humans, and send this message to the human sections only. This is Captain Jack Stone of the human vessel Humanity's Vengeance. We are here to free you. The Dominion crew is contained. Make your way to the docking bays. Freedom awaits." Robert sent the message. On the screen, they could see activity inside the transport. The human slaves were moving, flooding the corridors, heading toward the docking bays as instructed. The Dominion crew tried to stop them, but they were outnumbered. Many of the humans had been miners, strong despite years of poor treatment. They fought with tools, with bare hands, with anything they could find. "Prepare boarding parties," Jack told Ben, who had become his security chief. "We need to help them." Ben nodded and led teams of armed humans to the docking bays. They boarded the transport and helped guide the freed slaves back to the Humanity's Vengeance. It took hours to get all the humans aboard. The ship was crowded now, with barely enough room for everyone. But no one complained. They were free, and that was all that mattered. As for the Dominion crew of the transport, Jack gave them a choice: surrender or die. Most surrendered. They were put into the same holding pens they had used for human slaves. It seemed like justice. The next day, Jack called a meeting of his officers. The group had grown. Besides Tom, Robert, Kate, and Ben, there were now others. Anna had become communications officer. Mike, who had been found among the freed slaves, was now sensor operator again, just like on the horizon years ago. And there were new faces. Strong, smart people who had been freed from the transport and wanted to fight back. "We've struck our first blow," Jack told them. "But it's just the start. There are millions of humans enslaved across the Dominion Empire. We need to free them all." "We need more ships," Tom said. "One warship isn't enough." "The transport can be converted," Robert suggested. "It's not as powerful as a warship, but it can fight." "We also need information," Anna added. "Where are the largest groups of human slaves kept? Which facilities are the least defended?" They talked for hours, making plans. The freed humans from the transport had brought valuable information. They knew about other slave transports, about mining worlds where thousands of humans worked, about Dominion bases that weren't heavily guarded. Over the next few months, the human fleet grew. They captured 2 more transports and converted them into fighting ships. They raided a small Dominion outpost and took weapons and supplies. Each victory brought more freed humans to their cause. Each freed group brought new skills, new knowledge, and a burning desire for revenge against the species that had enslaved them. Word of the human rebellion reached the highest levels of the Dominion government. The Dominion Council, made up of the oldest and most powerful members of the species, met in their grand hall on Dominax Prime, their homeworld. "How is this possible?" demanded High Elder Vex, his scales turning red with anger. "These creatures were nothing when we found them. Primitive beings barely able to leave their own planet." "They are adaptable," said Commander Krell, the Dominion's most decorated military leader. "More so than any species we have encountered before. They learn quickly, and they work together in ways we did not expect." "Can you stop them?" asked another elder. Krell stood tall on his 6 limbs. "I will take a fleet of our best warships. I will find these rebel humans and crush them. This embarrassment will be ended." The elders approved the plan. Krell was given command of 15 warships, the largest fleet assembled in many years. They would hunt down the human ships and destroy them, but finding the humans proved harder than I expected. The human fleet never stayed in one place for long. They would appear, attack a Dominion facility, free any human slaves, and disappear before Dominion forces could respond. And the human fleet kept growing. 6 months after the capture of the subjugator, the humans had 7 ships. Not all were warships, but Robert and the other engineers had modified them, adding weapons and improving their speed. Finally, Krell got the break he was looking for. A damaged human ship left a trail that his scouts followed. The trail led to a star system with a small rocky planet. The human fleet was there, hiding in the shadow of the planet. "Prepare for battle," Krell ordered his fleet. "Today we end this human rebellion." The 15 Dominion warships moved into the system, their weapons ready. Krell was confident. He had superior numbers, superior firepower, and years of combat experience. The humans had a few stolen ships and no formal training. It would be an easy victory. He was wrong. The human fleet detected the Dominion ships coming. Instead of running or hiding, they formed a battle line. 7 ships against 15. The odds were bad, but the humans had something Krell didn't understand. A sense that they were fighting for their very existence as a species. "All ships battle formation," Jack ordered from the bridge of the Humanity's Vengeance. "Remember our plan. Hit and move. Don't stay in their firing solutions." The human fleet moved with surprising coordination. They had developed new tactics, taking advantage of their smaller size and greater maneuverability. The Dominion warships were powerful but slow to turn. The human ships darted in, fired their weapons at specific weak points, then moved away before the Dominion ships could respond effectively. It was chaos, but a controlled chaos that favored the humans. 3 Dominion warships were disabled in the first wave of attacks. 2 more were badly damaged when the humans targeted their engine cooling systems, causing them to overheat and shut down. Krell was shocked. His carefully planned attack was falling apart. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy he had faced before. They used strange tactics, took risks no Dominion commander would consider, and seemed to anticipate his orders before he gave them. "All ships regroup," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on their flagship." The remaining Dominion ships turned their weapons on the Humanity's Vengeance. The human flagship took heavy damage but didn't retreat. Instead, it charged directly at Krell's command ship, firing all weapons. Direct hits damaged Krell's ship. Alarm sounded on his bridge. His weapons officer reported that main weapons were offline. His engine room reported damage to the propulsion systems. Then Krell saw something that made his scales turn pale with fear. The human ships were surrounding his command vessel. The other Dominion ships were too damaged or too far away to help. "This is Captain Jack Stone of the Humanity's Vengeance," came a message on all frequencies. "Surrender your vessel or be destroyed." Krell had never surrendered in his long career, but he was a practical commander. He knew when a battle was lost. "This isn't over, human," he said, as he gave the order to stand down. "The Dominion has ruled this sector of space for 12,000 years. We will not be defeated by former slaves." "You already have been," came the reply. The Battle of Proxima Centauri will be remembered as the day humanity showed the galaxy that the Dominion can be beaten. As Krell's ship was boarded by armed humans, he realized with growing dread that this human rebellion was no longer just an embarrassment to the Dominion. It was an existential threat. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Dominion had suffered a significant military defeat, and it had come at the hands of a species they had dismissed as barely sentient. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Proxima Centauri. 1 year of constant fighting, freeing slaves, and building a force strong enough to challenge the mighty Dominion. The human fleet now numbered over 100 ships. Some were former Dominion vessels. Others were ships built by freed humans using Dominion technology and human creativity. On the bridge of the Humanity's Vengeance, Jack stood looking at a holographic map of Dominion space. The map had many red marks showing Dominion worlds and bases, but there were also blue marks showing places the humans had freed. The blue area was growing. "Report," Jack said to his officers. Anna spoke first. "The viral code is ready. Robert and his team have tested it on the systems we captured from Krell's ship. It works perfectly." The viral code had been Robert's idea. It was a piece of computer programming that could spread from one Dominion ship to another through their communication networks. Once inside a ship's systems, it would shut down weapons, engines, and life support. It wouldn't kill the Dominion crews, but it would leave their ships helpless. "Ben?" Jack turned to his security. "Chief, the assault teams are ready," Ben reported. "Every ship has trained fighters ready to board Dominion vessels once the virus disables them." Jack nodded. Tom, now fleet commander, checked his tablet. "All ships report ready for jump. We can be at Dominax Prime in 6 hours. Dominax Prime, the Dominion homeworld. The center of the empire that had enslaved humanity and dozens of other species. It was protected by the largest fleet in Dominion space. Attacking it was either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. "Kate?" Jack asked. Kate had become the fleet's chief medical officer, but she was also in charge of communicating with other enslaved species the humans had found and freed during their campaign. "The Rilari and Ventari ships are in position," she said. "They will join us for the final attack." The Rilari were a bird-like species with advanced technology. The Ventari were massive beings who lived in high-gravity worlds. Both had been enslaved by the Dominion for centuries. When humans freed them, they joined the fight eagerly. "Then we're ready," Jack said. "Send the order to all ships. We jump to Dominax Prime in 1 hour." As his officers went to prepare, Jack stayed looking at the map. He thought about the 3 years he had spent as a slave, and the year of fighting to free his people. So many had died, but so many had been freed. The Dominion had taken millions of humans from Earth. They had thought humans would be perfect, slaves, smart enough to work complex machines but not smart enough to fight back effectively. They had been wrong. Humans were not just smart. They were creative, adaptable, and they understood something the Dominion never did. Real strength comes from working together, not from forcing others to serve you. Jack had learned that the Dominion had been ruling their part of the galaxy for 12,000 years. In all that time, no species had successfully rebelled against them, until humans came along. The Dominion Council was meeting in their Grand Assembly on Dominax Prime. Reports from across their empire all told the same story. Ships being disabled by an unknown virus then boarded by human forces. Slave worlds being liberated. Dominion forces retreating or surrendering. "How is this possible?" demanded High Elder Vex. They were nothing. Animals with primitive technology. The other elders had no answer. Their civilization, built on the exploitation of lesser species, was facing its first real threat in thousands of years. Then something happened that shocked the council even more. Their secure meeting was interrupted by a communication signal that bypassed all their security protocols. The face of a human appeared on the large screen at the front of the chamber. It was Jack Stone. Older now, with scars and gray hair, but with eyes that burned with determination. "You called us slaves," he said simply. "That was your first mistake." The elders were too shocked to respond. How had this human hacked into their most secure communication system? Your empire has stood for thousands of years because you've only encountered species who surrendered or fought alone, Jack continued. Humanity does neither. At that moment, alarms began to sound throughout the Dominion capital city. The human fleet had arrived. Over 100 ships appeared in orbit around Dominax Prime. The Dominion home fleet moved to intercept them, but something strange happened. One by one, the Dominion ships went dark, their systems shutting down. Your second mistake, Jack said, was teaching us your technology while believing we couldn't understand it. We didn't just understand it, we improved it. The Dominion watched in horror as their home fleet powered down, leaving their world defenseless. The virus had spread through their entire network in minutes, disabling every ship, and your final mistake was believing that once broken we would never rise again. Humanity has faced extinction dozens of times in our history. Each time, we came back stronger. Jack's face was replaced by images from around the Dominion Empire. Human ships, freeing slaves on dozens of worlds. Former slave species joining the fight. Dominion bases surrendering to combined forces of humans, Rilari, Ventari, and other liberated peoples. We're not here for revenge, Jack's voice continued over the images. We're here to end your empire of slavery forever. The human fleet did not destroy Dominax Prime. They didn't have to. Instead, they landed troops who quickly took control of the main cities. The Dominion military, without their fleet and with their systems compromised by the virus, could not mount an effective defense. The Dominion Council was arrested by Ben and a team of human soldiers. They would stand trial for crimes against countless species. The Council Chamber, once the center of Dominion power, now became the meeting place for representatives of all the species they had enslaved. Over the next few months, the human-led alliance dismantled the Dominion Empire piece by piece. Every slave world was liberated. The neural inhibitor production facilities were destroyed. The Dominion military was disarmed and confined to their home system. 5 years after the first human was captured, the last Dominion slave world was freed. The species that had ruled a third of the galaxy found themselves restricted to their home system, their empire gone, their military broken. On the observation deck of the Humanity's Vengeance, Jack stood with Tom, Kate, Ben, and Robert, watching as representatives from 27 formerly enslaved species signed the Charter of Sentient Rights. It was a new beginning for this part of the galaxy, a promise that no species would ever enslave another again. They never understood what they were dealing with, Tom said quietly. Jack nodded. They saw our technology and thought it measured our worth. They should have looked at our history. He gazed at the stars, thinking of Earth. The planet was free again. The Dominion forces there had surrendered quickly when the human fleet arrived. Now humans were returning home, helping to rebuild what had been damaged during the occupation. But not all humans wanted to go back to Earth. Many, like Jack and his officers, had found a new purpose. There were other parts of the galaxy to explore, other species to meet. And there were still pirates and slavers out there who needed to be stopped. What now, Captain? Kate asked. Jack smiled. It was a real smile, something that had been rare during the years of slavery and war. The Humanity's Vengeance was a good name for a warship, he said, but I think it's time for a new name to match our new purpose. What did you have in mind? Robert asked. Humanity's Promise, Jack said, because that's what we are now. A promise that freedom is worth fighting for, and that no one should ever have to live as a slave. The others nodded their agreement. The war was over, the enslaved were free, and humanity had proven something important to the galaxy and to themselves. They called us slaves, Jack said, looking out at the stars. And we burned their armies to ash. But that was just the beginning of our story, not the end. As the Humanity's Promise prepared to leave orbit, Jack gave the order to set course for the unexplored regions beyond the former Dominion space. There were new worlds to discover, new civilizations to meet. And this time, humans were going into the galaxy not as slaves or conquerors, but as explorers and protectors. Humanity had been forged in the fire of slavery and war. They had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. The galaxy would never be the same again. And that was a good thing.